My name is Emily Carter, and for years I told myself my marriage was fine. On the outside I had everything a woman was supposed to want: a stable husband, a comfortable home, and a life that looked good in pictures. People who saw us at neighborhood barbecues or holiday gatherings would smile and comment on how lucky I was to have Michael, how solid we seemed together. I learned how to smile back and play along because it was easier than telling the truth. The truth was that silence had become the loudest part of our marriage. Michael wasn't a cruel man, not unfaithful, not violent, not even careless in the way some men can be. He was simply absent. His work had consumed him little by little, until his presence in our home was more like background noise than a beating heart. He would slip out early, long before the sun rose, and stumble back late, distracted, exhausted, already thinking about the next day. Our conversations became shallow exchanges about bills, schedules, and household chores. I missed him, missed his voice, his laughter, even his arguments. I missed the way he used to look at me as if I were the most interesting person in the room. That look had faded years ago, replaced by quick nods and half-smiles. It was in that hollow space that Jason Miller began to slip in, though neither of us planned it. Jason was a friend of the family, someone who had known us for years. He wasn't the type to demand attention, but he had a way of listening that made you feel like you mattered. He remembered little things like how I always added too much cream to my coffee, or how I used to hum when nervous. Where Michael's eyes glazed over halfway through a story, Jason leaned forward, genuinely engaged. It started innocently enough, as these things often do. There were evenings when Michael worked late, leaving me to make small talk with Jason at gatherings or while he helped with some errand. First I told myself it was nothing. Friends talk after all. But then there were moments when I caught myself laughing too hard at his jokes, lingering a little too long in conversation. I noticed how close he stood, how his hand would brush against mine when he handed me a glass, and how my chest would tighten at something so small. I knew the signs, knew the danger, but I told myself I was just starved for attention, that it didn't mean anything. One night it became harder to pretend. Michael had called to say he wouldn't be home until after midnight. I set the phone down with a quiet sigh, pouring myself a glass of wine I didn't really want. Jason stopped by unexpectedly to drop off some paperwork Michael had asked for, but instead of leaving right away, he stayed. We sat in the living room, sipping wine, the rain tapping softly against the windows. Our conversation moved easily, flowing from childhood memories to dreams we had never chased. At some point, I realized I was leaning closer, caught in his words, in the warmth of his gaze. When his hand brushed mine this time, I didn't move. I told myself it was harmless, just a touch, but the electricity that passed between us said otherwise. My heart hammered in my chest as if I had been caught doing something forbidden. I pulled my hand back, forced a laugh, and changed the subject, but the truth hung heavy in the air. I could see it in his eyes, he felt it too. That night, after he left, I sat alone in the quiet house, staring at the clock as the minutes dragged toward Michael's return. I felt both exhilarated and ashamed, as if I had stepped onto a ledge without realizing how close I was to the edge. I told myself I could stop it now, that it hadn't gone too far, that I still had control. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. The loneliness that had been my constant companion for so long had finally found company, and that company was dangerous. I tried to bury the memory, to shake off the feeling, but it clung to me. Every time Michael sat across from me at dinner, distracted and distant, I thought of Jason's eyes, his voice, the way he had leaned in as if I were worth hearing. I hated myself for it, hated the betrayal I hadn't even acted on yet. But I also couldn't deny the way it made me feel alive, the way it reminded me of who I used to be before the silence swallowed me whole. That was the beginning. A moment so small, so fleeting, yet powerful enough to unravel everything I thought I knew about myself, about loyalty, about marriage. I begged myself not to fall, not to give in to the pull, but the truth was already written in the way my heart raced whenever Jason's name crossed my mind. It was only a matter of time before temptation became something more. The first time it truly happened, it felt like the culmination of every stolen glance, every unspoken word that had built between us. It was another evening when Michael had called to say he'd be home late. His voice over the phone was casual, businesslike, as if staying away had become the default. I poured myself a glass of wine, telling myself I'd go to bed early. But then there was a knock at the door, and when I opened it, Jason was standing there, soaked from the rain, holding an umbrella that had given up halfway through the storm. I should have sent him away, told him it wasn't a good time. Instead, I ushered him in, handed him a towel, and poured another glass of wine. We sat side by side on the couch, the storm rattling outside, a perfect backdrop to what we both already knew was coming. Conversation felt unnecessary, almost forced, because the silence carried more weight than words. My chest was tight, my palms damp, and I could feel the pounding of my pulse in my ears. When he leaned in, it was hesitant, almost questioning, but I didn't stop him. The moment our lips met, a floodgate opened inside me. All the longing, the loneliness, the unspoken hunger erupted in that single kiss. My breath caught, and I whispered words I hadn't planned, hadn't even meant to say out loud. "Don't stop." And he didn't. From then on, it was as if we were caught in a current too strong to fight. We found excuses to see each other. Little errands, harmless-seeming meetups, but each one ended the same way, with stolen kisses, with touches that grew bolder, with a passion that had been absent from my life for years. I knew it was wrong. I knew every embrace was another nail in the coffin of my marriage, but my body and heart betrayed me. I craved the way Jason made me feel. Wanted, noticed, alive. Our meetings became a secret rhythm. A quick touch at a family gathering when no one was looking. Long afternoons in dimly lit hotel rooms where time seemed to stretch endlessly. Every time I whispered, "Don't stop," it felt like I was sinking deeper into something I could never climb out of. He listened. He never stopped. And part of me hated him for it because it made resisting impossible. At home, I wore the mask of a faithful wife. Michael noticed I seemed happier lately, more energetic. He mistook the glow of my betrayal for contentment in our marriage. He smiled, thinking perhaps the long hours at work were paying off, that I was finally proud of his success. His ignorance was both a blessing and a torment. I would smile back, all the while choking on guilt, knowing that the happiness he saw wasn't his to claim. Nights were the hardest. I would lie awake next to him, staring at the ceiling, Jason's touch still burning on my skin. I felt like two women living in the same body. The loyal wife who wanted to protect her marriage, and the reckless lover who begged for the fire Jason brought into my life. The battle between them left me restless, exhausted, and yet I couldn't let go. There were times when I told myself I'd end it. I would rehearse the words in my head, promising myself that the next time Jason called, I would say no. But when I heard his voice, when I saw the way he looked at me as if I were the only person in the world, all resolve melted away. I couldn't stop. I didn't want to stop. Jason, though, began to change. At first, he was content with stolen moments, with the thrill of secrecy. But soon he wanted more. He asked what it would be like if I left Michael, if we could be together openly without lies. His words filled me with both terror and temptation. I wanted to imagine that future. Yet the thought of tearing my marriage apart left me breathless with fear. One evening, after we had spent hours tangled together, Jason looked at me with a seriousness that silenced me. "Emily, I don't want to be your secret forever," he said. The weight of his words pressed down on me harder than anything before. For the first time, I saw not just passion but expectation in his eyes. He wasn't asking me for kisses anymore. He was asking for a decision. That night when I returned home, Michael was already asleep. I stood by the bed, staring at him, my husband, the man who had shared my life for more than a decade. He looked peaceful, unaware, trusting. I felt sick, torn in two, knowing that every step forward with Jason meant another betrayal of the man lying next to me. But the memory of Jason's voice echoed in my head. His words mixing with mine. "Don't stop." I was running out of time. It was inevitable, though I spent weeks pretending it wasn't. Secrets have a way of bleeding into the cracks of everyday life, no matter how carefully you try to hide them. I left my phone unattended one evening while I cooked dinner, humming absent-mindedly. When I came back, Michael was standing in the kitchen doorway, holding the phone in his hand. His expression wasn't angry or explosive, just stunned, wounded, like someone who had stepped on broken glass without realizing it was there. "Who's Jason?" he asked, his voice steady but low. The text was harmless compared to others. Just a simple "I miss you already," but it was enough. My chest constricted, and I felt my world tilt. I wanted to lie, to explain it away as something trivial, but the look in his eyes told me he already knew. My lips trembled as I admitted it, the words tumbling out like stones. "It's not what you think." "No, that's not true." "It's exactly what you think." My voice broke, and tears came before I could stop them. I confessed in fragments, like tearing pages from a book, each word another cut between us. I told him how lonely I had been, how Jason had filled a space that he hadn't even noticed was empty. And then I said the words I regretted instantly. I begged him not to stop, and he never did. Michael's face tightened, but he didn't shout. He didn't slam doors or throw things. He simply turned away, setting my phone gently on the counter as if it were a fragile object that might shatter. "I don't even know who you are right now," he whispered. That hurt more than any rage could have. The days that followed felt like living in the ruins of a burned house. We moved around each other like ghosts, speaking only when necessary, pretending for the sake of appearances that nothing had changed. But everything had. He slept in the guest room. He no longer reached for me, no longer asked about my day, no longer cared if I was happy or sad. I had gotten his attention in the worst possible way, and now I was drowning in it. Jason tried to step in, to become the anchor I needed. He called constantly, asked me to meet him, told me we could finally be together without lies. But the fantasy had begun to crack. Away from the shadows and secrecy, Jason seemed less like salvation and more like temptation that had gone too far. When he asked me to choose, my heart seized. I couldn't answer. One evening, Jason showed up outside my house uninvited. Michael's car was in the driveway, and for a moment the three of us stood there in silence. Jason on the porch, Michael watching from the window, and me trapped in the middle. I realized then that this wasn't a story of passion anymore. It was a story of destruction. Jason wanted more than I could give, and Michael deserved better than what I had given him. I asked Jason to leave. The look in his eyes told me he understood. It was over. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with Michael. The silence stretched until I couldn't take it anymore. I told him everything. How the loneliness had eaten at me, how I had mistaken attention for love, how I had destroyed the trust we had built. He didn't interrupt. He just stared at me with eyes so tired, so hollow, that I knew nothing I said could fix what I had broken. When I finished, he spoke quietly. "You could have told me you were unhappy. You could have asked me to stop working so much, to come home earlier. You could have begged me." He looked down at his hands, then back at me. "Instead, you begged someone else." Those words carved themselves into me deeper than any wound. He wasn't wrong. I had asked the wrong person to stay, to keep going, and now I was paying the price. Weeks turned into months. We tried counseling, tried to salvage what was left, but the foundation was too cracked. Michael moved out eventually, leaving the house hollow in a way I had never imagined. Jason faded from my life too. His promises ringing empty now that the thrill was gone. I was left with nothing but echoes. The echo of passion, of guilt, of mistakes that couldn't be undone. I spend nights now reflecting, turning the story over in my head like a stone in my palm. I thought infidelity would fill the emptiness, but instead it deepened it. I thought begging him never to stop meant I had found something real, but in truth, I was only asking for distraction from the silence of my marriage. The cruel irony was that in asking Jason never to stop, I had ended up stopping everything else that mattered. My trust, my marriage, my life as I knew it. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Desire can make you reckless, but recklessness has a cost. My mistake was not in wanting to feel alive, but in seeking life in the arms of the wrong man. And so I live with the consequence, with the memory of words that now feel like a curse. Don't stop. He never did. And now neither does the regret.